I'm gonna get this started with saying that I love tower defense games. They would have to be my favorite type of game. I mean, 4 out of the top 5 games that I've played on Roblox are tower defense games. The difference between a tower defense game and a Roblox tower defense game is we'll get into it. But today I want to tell you about the differences that make Roblox tower defense games bad. But before I begin, I just want to say that it's not all Roblox tower defense games. When I say, well, all, it's mostly just anime Roblox tower defense games. Sure, some other non-anime Roblox tower defense games may have the same problem, but I just want to highlight it's not all of them. So without further ado, let's talk about grinding. Grinding is something that is no stranger to Roblox tower defense games. Hell, even just normal Roblox games. It's shown time in and time out to be a main proponent in Roblox tower defense games, whether it be like a 5% drop from a story mission or just getting gems in the first place. Grinding is something you will have to do regardless. Now, I'd like to say that grinding isn't that much of an issue, but with the lengths that these games go to keep you engaged in playing is pretty fucking crazy. Like earlier I had stated that games that have like story missions will make you grind for a unit that's a 5%. Well, that unit might be just an evolution to a unit that you already had to spend an ungodly amount of gems to get it because, well, it's a 0.4% chance. Now, that's a more tame version of the grind, because grinding in these games become way less enjoyable the more units they add. You are likely to spend 20 or so hours grinding for a single unit from events or later updates. It will force you to first get a portal, next beat said portal for a chance of getting an even better portal until you get to around tier 5, that's usually when they stop. Then after you grind that tier 5 portal until you get the 1% drop, which is a secret portal for a unit that has an evolution that requires you to get stars, which is something else hella grindy, not to mention the fact that these portals require you to have the best characters to beat them in the first place. You have already spent an ungodly amount to get these units. Are you seeing a pattern? The grind to just grind more. That's what these games are. The hours you spend to get slightly better characters that will become useless in a month or two. That's what this is. Now, this wouldn't be a problem if it wasn't for the power creep. Now, power creep isn't inherently wrong. Hell, I would argue that power creep is a good thing. However, these games take a slight power creep and change it into a very steep power creep within moments. Even, well, mostly months, but, you get the gist. For example, let's talk about All-Star Tower Defense. When All-Star started introducing 6-star units via evolution in roughly May of 2021, I couldn't find the exact date, but we'll go for that as, like, when they dropped. Now, they weren't exactly strong, like, Frieza, for example, was doing 157 DPS at max. Now, if we take a look at Gilgamesh, who was released in August of the same year, we find him doing a whopping 127,000 DPS. That is nearly an 1,000 times jump from 157 to 127,000. Now, I mean, if we look at a more recent unit like Ego Vegeta, he's doing 40 million, so it's not like this huge giant trend continued, but still 127 million, not million, 127,000 compared to 40 million is still a huge fucking gap. But the gap from 157 to 127,000 is still fucking crazy, especially when you consider it's only like 3 months, while the 127,000 is 3 years. Now, I just want to state that this isn't exclusive to All-Star, but, that's not something I really need to talk about right now. What I really want to talk about is how these characters become so obsolete. Yet, Erwin was one of the best All-Star units for multiple years. But why? Well, that's because he's a support unit. Now, support units are kind of the bread and butter of tower defense games. But Roblox tower defense games usually only have around 3 categories for these support units. The categories have their own subcategories, but the categories are debuffs, buffs, and farms. Now, debuff units can do one of 4 things. They either stun the unit or completely stop them, like a time stop unit, for example. They could slow a unit, they could push the unit back, or they can make them take more damage. Buff units usually have one of 3 things that they do, which is like buff the unit, buff their range, buff the SBA. That's really about it. And finally, there are farm units that really only do one single thing, which is make money. Now, to some people, that might seem like a lot of uses, but to some people that play normal tower defense games, like Bloons Tower Defense 6, this seems like kind of like the borderline of support units. Well, what do I mean by borderline? Well, if we take a look at the supports of Bloons, you'll see that they have like multiple categories for support units. Like buffs could have multiple uses like buffing units, buffing price, or pierce. Buffing units. Buff units which have multiple uses like buffing the damage, buffing the pierce, buffing the attack speed, buffing that stacks like overclock, selective buffs that buff certain kind of groups of monkeys, the buff ability cooldown, buff ability cooldowns, what I mean, just to name a few. And there's also debuff towers that slow balloons, stun balloons, push balloons back, remove fortify from balloons, make balloons take more damage, etc. There are also farms which of course make money, but there's also other kinds of support, like monkeys that can, give discounts to other monkeys, and like the village. The village can give discounts to monkeys, they can make some upgrades become free, and the amount of shit that you need to think about in Bloons is crazy. Like, you need to think about camos, leads, camo leads, bad damage, Moab damage, ceramic rushes, regen balloons, fortified Moabs, and such, and all this and more. And that's why Bloons Tower Defense 6 is a strategy game, because, well, it's pretty complicated if you just like hopping into it randomly. I mean, if you played for a month, you probably know all this shit, and you can usually, easily, maybe even like 2 weeks, you could figure out how to deal with all this shit. But let's think about a Roblox tower defense game. They have air units, which are relatively easy to beat. You can practically put a hill unit, and usually those are better than the ground units. Ground units are usually kind of like boss killers, but like they're kind of shit. So I mean, well, I mean, let's be fair. They also have regen, cloners, faster enemies, and things that can stun your units. But the difference is, in Bloons, you have to think about how to deal with these. With combos of monkeys, like having a village down, or having a fucking, the submarine that decamos them, or a ninja monkey that could deal with the camo, or, a bomb shooter that could deal with lead. In Roblox tower defense games, all you really think of is, what is the one single unit that I can use that maybe has a buff or two, that could easily deal with the entire hard, quote-unquote, hard mission? Well, you could also have an OP trait on him, so you don't even have to use the buffs. Realistically, they're so fucking simplistic, which is crazy for a fucking strategy game. The only thing people really have to think about is how they AFK overnight, because usually those games don't like you AFKing, even though they make the grind hellish. But, I think that's roughly all of my points about this. Now, I could go on about the other shit that makes me mad about these games, but I think I've made my main points of the issue for these games very clear. I think these games could improve a lot if they just focus on support units. Maybe not focus, but, actually give the support units attention rather than making a buff unit, a slow unit, and a farm, and then make that the only support units you have for like 3 fucking years. But they also need a huge revaluation of how the grind in these games are, because holy shit, the grind is insane. Anyways, I hope y'all liked me talking about this, and I hope to see you guys in the next one.